and welcome to the Biblically Centered podcast. Biblically Centered equips your family with knowledge and conversations for you to live and defend your Christian faith.
Yes, hi.
So again, real quick off the top, just want to make sure you guys, if you do listen to this and you do enjoy the content, make sure you make sure you subscribe, whether you're watching this on just streaming this so you can listen to our voices, or if you watch on YouTube. Liking and subscribing is a great way that this gets pushed out there for more people to come across it, which is a great thing.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. We like making the algorithms happy, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. You have to, I guess. So real quick, we wanted to start off. We put out a new resource kind of in between this episode and the episode before. And so we just wanted to share with you guys about that and give a testimony. If you guys ever have a testimony or something you want to let us know, we would love to read it and share it. So our new resource is How to Read the Bible with Your Kids, and it has for each age stage learning level. So from 0 to 6, we kind of have a page on how to do that with those kids, and then 7 to 11, and then 12 and above. And it just kind of helps set your intentionality with reading the Bible. I know for me, it's been a development, a process of trying to figure out how am I communicating this to my children and making it important and making sure that they're grasping and understanding it. So it's got some questions in there, and so you can find that at biblicallycentered.com under the freebies section. Mm-hmm. But a testimony, if you want to be even more interested and pumped about it, this is from Brittany B, and it says, Danica, I love this. It's so easy to understand and glance quickly through for us mamas with not a lot of brain space at the moment. I love how each stage is in a different color, and I love how you use the classical model and brought it to life for training our kids up in Him. Such a neat resource that brings some ease of mind, knowing how to approach teaching our kiddos in each phase of life. I've already shared it with friends. Thank you for your time investing in it. So nice. Thank you, Brittany, for your kind words. And yeah, go grab that. And we hope that it helps you know how to better communicate with your children.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a really, really cool resource. So lots of resources getting made. We've actually had, for those who listen regularly, we've had a few week gap on the podcast episodes, and a lot of it's mainly because there's been a lot of effort that's been poured into a lot of the resources and content on Biblically Centered.
Yes.
But we have all that in a pretty good spot now. So we're going to start doing the podcast regularly, weekly again.
Yes.
So apologize for those who, just missed us.
I know. Yeah.
We miss doing this.
And we know that, I think other parents would understand. We also had 2 kid birthdays in there and family in. It just kind of piles up quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because once our youngest has his birthday in June, which we just went through, and then it's like a big gap.
Yes.
Until the next birthday. But it was like we have a March, a May, and a June birthday.
Oh, man. The daily conversations of what kids wanted every single day was a lot. And so we were trying to communicate thankfulness through that, but I'm sure every other parent knows that is a struggle.
It is.
So we're done with birthdays. So we're done talking about who wants what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So today's episode, let's talk about it.
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Today we are going to wrap up our 4th virtue category. So from the previous episodes, we've talked about the first virtue category was authorities, and then we had choices, and then relationships, and now this is attitudes. Mm-hmm. And each of those categories contains 4 virtues. And so today we're going to wrap up the last 2 in that category. So would you want to read those for us?
Sure. We're going to do virtue 15 and 16. Virtue 15 is we kindly respond with gentleness because all people are made in God's image. And then virtue 16 is we demonstrate empathy to others by extending patience.
Yes. So a lot of these, the aspects of these are kind of the fruits of the Spirit. And so you'll kind of see that progression. We first recognized the authority God has in our life, and then we based our choices around that, and then that affects how we are in relationship to others, and then this is our attitude and behaviors that are flowing out of that place of reliance and dependence on God.
Right.
So, and again, these just all, especially in this category, I feel like they just all overlap so well. So that's kind of why we're doing two together, because I feel like it's hard. Honestly, we could have done an episode with all four. I mean, the way that they all interact and
correlate
work
with each other,
off of each other. But each virtue, we're trying to break them up as much as we can to communicate those to our kids. So, all right, virtues. Or not virtue, definitions. Oh my goodness. Definitions.
A little rusty.
Everyone knows
we
love definitions. So, gentleness is a genteel behavior, softness of manners, mildness of temper, sweetness of disposition, tenderness, mild treatment, dignity of birth. And I would also add dignity of worth of who we are created in God. I mean, that's what that virtue says.
I have a confession. So
okay.
Genteel is a word?
Yeah, genteel.
Oh.
That's like the original. Yeah.
Nice. I honestly thought that was a typo.
Oh, no.
When I saw that.
The nammers, that's a typo.
Nammers. I didn't notice that one.
Oh, man. But yes, genteel.
Oh, cool.
Is a word. Yeah.
Well, I'm learning something too.
There you go. Okay, to quote Martin Luther, and this is the original Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, you got it? Okay, good.
Well, I got it. I don't know if they do.
Oh, okay.
They got it now, though.
Okay, good. Here's a quote that I really liked from him on this virtue. He says, God has promised great mercy to those who seek peace and endure guile. War does not gain much, but loses much and risks everything. Gentleness, however, loses nothing, risks little, and gains everything. So I just liked the comparison between being gentle and then war, or being like in rival to one another. Yeah, combative. And then another quote by Jonathan Edwards. It says, a virtue which I need in a higher degree to give a beauty and luster to my behavior is gentleness. If I had more of an air of gentleness, I should be much mended.
Yeah, I mean, those are both great quotes. Because I know, especially, there's times as parents you kind of sometimes feel like, especially when your kids are in certain stages or ages of life where they might be a little more maybe resistant or trying to push the boundaries of the parameters of your home, that sometimes you can kind of feel like you're in combat with your kids, like you're being combative with them, you know, kind of butting heads a lot. And sometimes, you know, tensions can rise. We experience this.
Yeah.
But just the importance of understanding that us as parents, like, we're called to lead our kids with gentleness.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and well, we won't get into that discussion. I was going to talk about, you know, the verse about spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
But like, and I know that people can have their discussions on spanking or whatever, but like, you know, from what the little I understand about shepherding, I don't know a lot. I know a little, to make that clear. So if someone's on here who is a shepherd and you have a flock of sheep, don't critique my assessment. But my understanding of the rod is it's a loving guidance to the sheep back to the flock. Yep. You're not beating the sheep back to the flock. It's just a gentle reminder to them to kind of get them back into the. And so even though there might be times where it stings a little, it's still, the approach is gentle. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When I think you would rather direct them a little now than to wait for the bigger repercussions later.
Right.
You know.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the important thing. But I think it's more so the motive of the heart as the parent is the gentle correction. Yeah. Like, it is correction. It is setting boundaries. Like, that's, you know, there's discipline in that. Yeah. But it's not out of...
it's not out of spite.
Or like in the moment anger.
Right.
Which, I mean, we're parents, you know, we have those moments.
Yeah.
Where you kind of just feel fed up with just everything that's gone on in the day or the attitudes or whatever. And sometimes you can respond
Yeah.
So that's why this virtue speaks to me a lot, is because it's like, yeah, we kindly respond with gentleness.
Yeah.
And that doesn't say, there's not really a clause to that.
Yeah.
It's like, we kindly respond in gentleness unless your kids are really getting on your nerves. Then you can respond in anger.
Yeah.
So that's convicting to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think just for children to learn, especially that last bit of that verse, all people are made in God's image. I think recognizing someone's worth just for the fact of alone that God created them, and I mean, I don't know. I just think that part is also important, just that we're teaching our children to value other people. But like we've talked about before with submitting to correction and accepting discipline, there are those other aspects that are going to go into it, but you don't, like you just said, you want to approach all those things with gentleness, because they are a masterpiece of God's, like we're going to act in love towards them. We're going to have forgiveness, but then there also are going to be those moments of having to discipline and kind of redirect. So, yeah. James 3:17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And so, just kind of some aspects of gentleness that we can talk about, is that gentleness surprises people. Because I don't know if anyone's noticed. I mean, I don't know. Are you guys noticing that our culture is really loud and aggressive? I don't know. Do people? Sorry, that's my sarcastic comment there. But
it's
just
definitely in your face.
Yes.
Especially this month.
So I think being able to just respond in almost an opposite manner, not out of like, oh, I'm going to respond the opposite, but just being like, no, you know what? I'm going to respond in gentleness and choose to be kind to other people, I think can really help people take their guard down. I think a lot of people just are always walking around with this guard up and they're going to attack you and you're going to attack them. But if you can be gentle to them, then they're going to be like, wait a second. And so, the gospel of Jesus is so loving and so much just wants to get people's attention and reach their heart. And that's hard to do when everyone's so built up and hardened. And so gentleness is a way to kind of slide in a little bit and, let them know that Jesus did come to die for everyone. And so, and again, that doesn't discredit all the other, like we are called to holiness, like all of those things that will come with our sanctification. But first of all, just for them to know that God does deal gently with us. And I think we just talked about mercy, being one of his characteristics. Like the mercy he has for us is overwhelming. So,
yeah, and I think it's also important. I had a pretty good train of thought, and see if I can hop back on that train. The notion of, and I don't have this verse in front of me, so I'll probably butcher it exactly, but it's in Proverbs, and it basically talks about how, like, watching your tongue or like speaking little, people assume you're wise. Essentially, the less you speak, kind of thing. Roughly put, but I feel like like us as Christians, like there is a lot of battles in the world around us. There's a lot of things we can give our insight into, our input, our vantage point to kind of like in the comment section on this thread or on this video or whatever to kind of like get them and make them like, well, you guys are, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us as Christians that like we don't have to enter every battle.
Right.
Like not every video you see, every thread you come across, everything you disagree with is worth your opinion. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think so. And I
do think there, but I guess the point I'm getting to is there is a place and a time for those discussions.
Right.
But it's something you need to be led into.
Yes.
You don't, just because you come across a YouTube video of a guy, talking about, I don't know, whatever they talk about on YouTube. of something you disagree. I don't know. You don't have to but I know for me and my personality, sometimes I like the discourse.
Yeah.
I like having conversations with people, but I know that can be tempting to kind of like assert yourself just to kind of prove your point and make yourself feel right.
Yeah.
Or versus like coming at it from a gentle perspective of really wanting to lead people into the truth.
Right. Well, and I guess if you just think about it, the things that you believe in your life, did you believe them because someone gave you a fancy quote? Or if they questioned something or posed a question to you that made you think and made you research, made you think like, where did I get that idea? How did I come up with that? Why do I believe that to be true? It's more that journey, I think, that sticks with people more than just like, here's my one little, oh, you believe that? Here's my little comment to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like people are going to take that. And again, that's going to put their guard up of like, oh, you know, in an attack mode. Whereas I think we've talked about it before, just being in relationship with people. I mean, a lot of Christ's ministry was relational, and we've talked about that before. But it's person to person, not computer screen to computer screen. And so that's really the environment that is, I think, better suited to help someone. And if you're being gentle in your response to them. So if you are having a conversation with them in real life and asking them genuine questions, that's going to lead them, I think, a little better than just sitting there and going XYZ. You know, and then they're like, they need to process through that and be seeking and finding. I mean, I just read, it's both in Matthew and in Luke, those verses, like whoever seeks will find, whoever knocks the door will be, open unto them. That is how they're actually going to find Christ, is when we ask them what their door has been, or we ask them what they've been seeking, and we're leading them that way. Yeah. Not just like, here it is over here.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay.
And it's not to say that there isn't battles we need to be in.
Right. Yes.
But it's just, you just need to be led, not just, it doesn't need to be an emotional response to something you happen to come across on the internet. Right.
Because is that showing God, or is that showing your pride in, oh, well, I know the right?
Well, that's the important distinction, because I mean, it's human nature to want to feel right. Yeah. And feel like whatever your stance is on this, that you're correct.
Yeah.
So just really focus on yourself. Like whenever you're in these conversations or trying to have these discussions, are you trying to just prove that you're in the right? Yeah. Or are you really trying to show Christ?
Yes.
And I think there's a distinction there.
Yes, for sure.
Because motives matter.
Yes.
Anyways, we can move on.
No, I love that. Okay, so another aspect of gentleness is that it dignifies people. And so this kind of just speaks to what we were talking about. Hasty aggressiveness is you acting in superiority. And so gentleness shows people that they matter and that they have inherent glory. Because if you're going to be gentle in your response, I think what you were saying earlier about being slow to speak, you're letting them talk. And I don't know how many times, maybe it's just me, I'm a very verbal processor. You know this. I'll just be talking and talking. But it's when I'm doing that and someone's just listening, a lot of times by the end of me verbal processing things, I'm like, oh, okay, I should, I see that. You know, it's like you're giving them time to process through things, which is important. But being gentle, I mean, how much of this, and you and I were both raised in the church in Christian families, and I think maybe sometimes we get, what's the word? Like, other people didn't have that experience. Mm-hmm. And so if we're pointing out these things, it's like they don't know what that means. They don't understand that. And again, the words like mercy, the words like forgiveness might really be foreign concepts to them. Mm-hmm. So being gentle, and we love definitions, defining those things to them, you know, I think is really helpful to clearly communicate to them.
Right. And same thing with your kids, obviously, because they're
Yes.
learning all these things for the first time. So
Yes.
making sure you're kind of these concepts that might be a little deeper and things that even people who grew up in the church are still wrestling with, like really doing our job as parents to try to break it down for them in their age group,
Well,
which is why I'm thankful for what we've done with Biblically Centered.
Yes, because that's kind of our goal with these virtues is we've created those age stages so that you really are layer upon layer making these concrete in them.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early years, you're just defining a lot of terms, just talking about what this means versus that. And then when they get a little older, you're defining them maybe a little bit more and digging into those. And then when they're older, they're really able to fully comprehend. So it does take time, but the time and effort is worth it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Gentleness gives people a picture of Christ. And so we are the closest thing to Jesus himself that people will see. So how we treat people is what people will think we believe Jesus is like. And I'm going to say that last part again. It says how we treat people is what people will think that we believe Jesus is like. So if you are...
Don't know that we are Christians by our online discourse.
But I mean, honestly, it's like, if we say we believe in Christ and that we are followers of him, that means we are going to emulate him in what we say and in how we live. And if what you're saying and in how you're living does not line up with a picture of Christ, how are people going to know the real Christ?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to think he's what you're like. And if you're not portraying him, I mean, I think that's why there is a lot of discourse now between just people who claim to be Christians are Christian. I mean, I think there's just so many different broad categories, and it's like we never really define that, or we never really, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is really, I think, humbling to just think about, like, oh, like my actions and words are showing Christ to the people around me and to my children.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to tell them that Christ has compassion on us, then I should be showing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give them a false perception of Christ. I don't want to give them, if you are adding or subtracting anything from God or from Jesus Christ, then you have in essence made an idol.
Yeah.
It's not the true God. And so I think that's what each of these virtues, I think, is trying to help layer those facets of God so that we can see the full picture. And it's not just focusing on one aspect.
Right.
Because God isn't one aspect.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only portraying one aspect of God to your children, they're not getting the full, rounded, beautiful picture of God.
Well, it's like when we talk about holiness.
Yeah.
Because like holiness kind of encapsulates so many attributes of God.
Yeah.
It's like God is love because he's holy,
Yeah.
you know. So, anyways, for sake of time, we probably need to move on to the the next one.
Oh, guys, we could just talk about these all day. Okay. So we'll talk about patience for a little bit, I think is where we should go. Okay. So, patience, a definition of that is the suffering of afflictions, pain, toil, calamity with a calm, unruffled temper, endurance without murmuring or fretfulness, constitutional fortitude, Christian submission to God, and the act of waiting long for justice or expected good without discontent, bearing offense without anger or revenge.
That last line's a tricky one.
Ooh. Yes, it is. So yeah, Philippians 2, kind of the end of verse 1 and 2, it says, "Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose." And I will say it's not agreeing with everything that someone believes, but on those things that you can agree on, let's agree. Let's show that there is some common ground, but not in a way that is going against Christianity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, oh yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you. It's like, no, let's find that common ground so that we can build a bridge think that's what we always need to try to be doing with unbelievers. Like, where are those bridges or those points that we can find so that then they see that we are being gentle and patient with them. Yeah.
Just keep looking at that, bearing offenses without anger or revenge.
Is that speaking to you right now?
I just think, I just love this material a lot, and just that definition it's important, because I think it is just so important that we as Christians, like we've talked about this episode, we're like the way we live our life, the way we respond to the world, the way we respond to stimulants or whatever, the things around us, that we just respond differently than the world.
Yeah.
And so bearing an offense without anger or revenge, like that's a very unnatural feeling. Because oftentimes if someone wrongs you, your initial response is to figure out a way to get them back or to respond quickly. And I can be guilty of this too. Sometimes the way you respond in the moment is not what you really wanted to say, but at the same time, it is telling of something that's in you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's so many times, like in a moment, like if I feel a sense of anger come on me like really quick because of a situation, I might say something in the moment, kind of quick-witted or something, or kind of sarcastic, that then, 5 minutes passes and I'm like, man, I really should have just held my tongue and just let that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my flesh wants to respond and get them, and kind of right in that moment, but it
It kind of reminds me, and I forget, I just read recently, but it was talking about that, about kind of our response if we're trying to make things right or counter or equal an offense or an attack. It's almost as if we're not trusting God to be just.
Mm.
We're not trusting him to ultimately be the one who is who we're accountable to. So we're kind of taking that from him to be like, no, I'm going to enact justice in this situation. I'm going to I think it's in that book I'm reading right now, Unoffendable. Yeah. Which is good. There's a few things.
It's fine.
Yeah. It's good.
We'll do a book review podcast down the road.
So many books. But I thought that was really interesting of like, oh, that is what I'm doing in those situations. If I'm taking it on myself to try to think about how this situation should be justified in my mind, then I've totally written God off as someone who isn't concerned or doesn't care about that situation. In that book, he gives a really good example. I forget her name and I forget the exact situation, but it was someone who it was a woman who had terrible things done to her. But she was able to forgive that person because ultimately she said, there's nothing that I can do here on earth that would matter or that would make that right again. And I just have to leave it to God, like whether that gets put in place here on earth or whether that's after. I just have to know that God does care about me. He did care about me in that situation and he will make it right. I think our human nature to want vengeance, I don't think that can ever be satisfied. So I think even if we did determine something to do to try to get back at someone, because our flesh is so selfish, it would never fully satisfy us to that extent.
We all know sin is never satisfied. Your flesh is never satisfied. So you might think that this is the thing to kind of whatever, but if it's outside of God's character, then it's not gonna. Yeah. It'll bring upon regret, remorse, all those things. So.
Yeah.
All right, keep it trucking.
All right. There's just some of these. We could talk all day. All right. Let's see. Should I just read the closing verse? You want me to go into that?
That's fine.
Okay. Ephesians 4:1-3. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. All these things working together to show that we are walking in a manner worthy of the calling. And again, I think that all goes back to that first virtue we talked about holiness and pursuing holiness. Like, we should be pursuing that because our lives, we want to walk in a manner that is worthy of the Lord. Like, if you recognize what he's done in your life, you want to do everything you can to show that. Mm-hmm. And again, I think we've talked about it's not works based, but it's the works come from a place of having faith and love towards God, that the outpouring of that transforms your life into how you are communicating and living. Yeah. I mean, we want to look different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that verse goes against pretty much everything that is your innate desire, I would say, or your initial fleshly response.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for letting us go on about these. I feel like we got riled up there a few times. Yeah, do you have anything else to say?
No, I like that last verse, the line worthy of the calling walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called.
Yeah.
Like, we've been called to seek and save the lost, to raise our children.
Yeah.
And so walk in a way that's worthy of that.
Yeah. Well, that just kind of reminds me, we're heirs of Christ. We've been adopted into his family. So if you were once a regular person and you somehow found out that your great whoever was a king and you are now in line for the throne, you're going to walk a little differently. Mm-hmm. If you ace a test, you're going to walk a little differently. I mean, just think about that. And I think sometimes we make being a Christian or being saved just kind of like, oh yeah, that's real cool.
It's kind of part of my life.
Yeah. We make it ordinary or monotonous. And it's like, no, that's the most incredible thing that has ever happened to you. Mm-hmm. And so we should remind ourselves that and be walking in a manner worthy of that so that people do recognize that.
Yeah. And especially as we raise our families or as we live our daily lives, like, I think it's important every now and again to sit down and think about your lifestyle, think about your routines, think about the conversations you have in your home with your spouse, yada, yada, and really think about what is it that we are doing regularly that's different than the world.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
Right.
Aside from going to church on Sunday.
Right. Like, is that the only thing that is making you different? Are you overburdened with, I don't know. You have to be involved in everything and go to everything and like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's just one aspect of it, but yeah. What are we doing?
We can get on the church topic on a different episode because I could go on, the verse about, how does it say? Not to, is it forsake? What's the word that they use? I forget. We'll get there. About the assembly of the believers, not forsaking the assembly of believers.
Yeah.
But then that word forsake, which I don't know if, and I don't have any notes in front of me, but I think it's forsake. But what that word means is think little of.
Yeah.
So it says don't think little of the assembling of believers.
Yeah.
And so that's a different episode again, but just the importance of your church community being like kind of like a non-negotiable with your family.
Yeah.
Obviously understanding there are going to be the whatevers that happen where maybe you have to miss a Sunday. Yeah. But it's not like, Mom, Dad, are we going to church today? Well, I don't know. But that it's something that you're teaching your kids, like, this is the priority, because it's something you have to establish now when they're young, because there will be so many things the world is going to throw at you that will get you off on missing a Sunday.
Yeah.
Whether it be your kids' sporting schedules or personal things you have going on, work things, whatever, that it's like, oh yeah, we're doing it on Sunday. Because Sundays, I'm sure, not that I was alive then, but back in the day, Sundays were kind of built into culture as a Sabbath.
Yeah.
And now it's just just another day for a lot of people. It's another day to get things done, to do get to the game or whatever.
Yeah.
But just the importance of not thinking little of the assembling of believers. So that's, again, a different topic. But we went there.
Well, yeah. Well, and it goes throughout your week too. Like, are you spending time in the Word or talking about God every day with your children? I think sometimes that can also be pushed under the rug. Like, oh, we have to get to this and this and this and this. And you've gone to 3 appointments, but you haven't set your focus or your intention for the day. And I think them being able to see that in you of like, how is mom and dad, how are they starting their day? How do they kind of come back? I know sometimes during our day, it's like, oh, okay, we need some worship music playing in here. We need to reset the day, you know, and like, how are you when those things do build up or get to there? What is your response? Is it like, everyone just go to your room? Or is it like, no, let's come together. Let's just be quiet, but let's reset our focus on Christ. And I don't know, it's just kind of thinking through those things of what do you do? What is your filter through things? And we're not saying that we're perfect in any regard, but I think it's what is your intention and how are you addressing that, I guess. Yeah. So.
Sweet. Well, that's what we got for you today.
Yes. Thank you.
Again, biblicallycenter.com.
Yes.
If you could.
Podcast episodes, there's some blogs, there's those freebies that we talked about earlier today. If you're wanting kind of a direction on how to read the Bible or Bible stories with your children, that's a great resource for you. And again, like, subscribe, share it.
Yes, please. That helps.
Please, that really helps. So
other than that, we will see you next time.
Thanks.
Adios.
Bye.